Growing up in a quiet suburb, our family was the picturesque representation of love and unity. Our house, with its whitewashed walls and blue shutters, was always filled with laughter and warmth. My father, a dedicated police officer named John, was a towering figure, not just in height, but in the presence he brought into our lives. With his crisp uniform and gleaming badge, he was my hero, the man who made the world safer, one day at a time.
On weekends, he would take Luke and me to the local park, where we'd play catch or just lay on the grass, looking up at the clouds. Looking up at the clouds. "Look, Ella," he'd say, pointing upwards. "That one looks like a dragon, doesn't it?"
And I'd giggle, more like a fluffy bunny, Dad. Luke, 2 years my senior, had Dad's determination. Even as a kid, he'd march around the house imitating Dad's gait, pretending to be Officer Luke's. The bond between them was unmistakable. Our mother, Clara, was the glue that held us together. Her hazel eyes sparkled with mischief and love. She was an artist, painting landscapes and sometimes portraits of us. The house was adorned with her creations, each one telling a story of its own. Her laughter was infectious, and she had this incredible ability to make any situation light-hearted. I remember one evening when I was around 10, and Luke and I were bickering over a toy. Frustrated, I shouted, "It's mine!" Luke retorted, "No, Ella, I had it first." Suddenly, Mom intervened with a paintbrush in hand. "How about I paint it half blue for Ella and half green for Luke? That way, it's fair." We both stared at her, our argument forgotten, and then burst into giggles. That was Mom, always finding solutions with a touch of whimsy. But fate has its way of testing the strongest bonds. One rainy evening, the phone rang, its shrill tone cutting through the patter on the windows. I saw Dad's face pale as he listened to the voice on the other end. The words accident and hospital echoed in the room, freezing the very air we breathed. That night, we lost our radiant son. Mom was gone. The house that once resonated with joy became a silent witness to our grief. The walls, covered with her paintings, seemed to mourn her absence, and her art studio remained untouched, a sacred space of memories. In the following days, neighbors and friends offered condolences. Mrs. Henderson from next door held my hand and said, "I'm so sorry, dear. Remember the good times." But how could I? The void was too vast, the pain too raw. That was the beginning of our transformation as a family, of the dynamics that would shift and reshape our lives forever. As the weeks turned into months after our mother's passing, the atmosphere in our house had drastically changed. Our once vibrant home was a stark contrast to the life we had known. Dad, drowning in his grief, threw himself into his work. He would often return home late, his face hardened by the weight of loss and the stresses of his job. However, there was one thing that kept him going: Luke's aspiration to join the police force. Luke, always the determined one, had found solace in the thought of continuing the legacy of law enforcement in our family. He began to spend hours poring over books about criminal law, forensic science, and police protocols. The living room, which once echoed with our laughter, became his study space, littered with textbooks and notes. One evening, I entered the room to find Luke engrossed in a book titled Policing 101. I nudged him playfully, planning to catch some bad guys, Officer Luke. He looked up, a hint of a smile on his face. Someone's got to do it, right? Plus, I think it's what Dad needs right now. A connection, something to hold on to. Dad, overhearing our conversation from the kitchen, walked in with 2 mugs of steaming coffee. Handing one to Luke, he sighed, "You remind me so much of myself at your age. Always curious, always ready to take on the world." "Dad?" Luke hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I've been thinking. I want to join the police academy. I want to walk the path you've walked, to understand what it truly means to serve and protect." Dad's eyes welled up. with a mix of pride and sorrow. "Your mother would have been so proud," he whispered, placing a hand on Luke's shoulder. "But remember, it's not an easy path. It demands sacrifices." Luke nodded with determination. "I know, Dad, and I'm ready." I watched their exchange, feeling a blend of pride for my brother and an increasing sense of alienation. Their shared dream was building a bridge between them, but it also created a widening chasm between my father and me. I often found solace in my online world, a space where I could carve out my identity, away from the shadows of family expectations. As the days progressed, Luke's preparation for the academy became more intense. Dad, despite his initial hesitations, started to assist him. They'd spent hours discussing various cases, sharing insights, and even recreating crime scenes for better understanding. The bond between them grew stronger, cemented by shared aspirations and memories of Mom. Throughout this phase, I stood at the sidelines, cheering for my brother and silently crafting my own journey, away from the legacy of badges and handcuffs. Little did I know then that our paths, though diverging, would be intertwined by fate in the chapters to come. The year Luke entered the police academy was the year I truly began to feel my father's detachment. As my brother embraced the world of law enforcement, I found solace and success online. The world of social media, digital artistry, and online marketing beckoned, and I was more than ready to answer. One evening, as I sat in my room, working on a design project for a client, I overheard Dad and Luke talking in the living room. "That was a tough case today," Luke said, sounding exhausted. "But it's all part of the learning process, I guess."
"Dad," Ever the mentor responded, "Every case will teach you something, son. Just remember to always trust your instincts."
Their conversations, which were once peppered with familial anecdotes and references to our shared past, were now dominated by cop jargon and case discussions. And as proud as I was of Luke, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being left out, relegated to the background of our family tapestry.
One Sunday, after finishing an online meeting, I decided to share my achievements with Dad. Bursting with excitement, I approached him with my laptop. "Dad, look at this. My design got featured on a prominent website. Isn't it amazing?"
He glanced briefly, offering a half-hearted smile.
"That's great, Ella. But you know, the internet can be a fleeting place. Today, they like you. Tomorrow, they might not. Just..."
His lukewarm response stung. That night, during dinner, Luke animatedly shared a story from his training. You wouldn't believe the chase I was part of today. We tracked this guy through 3 blocks before finally catching him. Dad beamed with pride.
"You're a natural, just like I was at your age. Your mother would have been thrilled to see you in action."
Feeling like an outsider at my own dinner table, I interjected, trying to reclaim some space in the conversation. "Speaking of running, I've started this new online fitness program."
"It's been amazing. And I've already got about 1,000 followers."
Dad nodded absent-mindedly. "That's nice, Ella." And then, without missing a beat, he turned to Luke. "Did you manage to get that guy's statement?" My achievements, no matter how significant to me, always seemed trivial in the face of Luke's new heroic world. That night, as I lay in bed, tears streamed down my face. The distance between my father and me felt like an insurmountable chasm. I longed for recognition, a sign that he still saw me as his daughter and not just the shadow of my brother. But as the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the pattern remained unchanged. Luke's tales of the academy were met with enthusiasm and pride, while my digital accomplishments garnered little more than a nod. The weight of invisibility bore down on me, making each day a struggle to find my place in a home that once was mine. The culmination of Luke's years at the police academy was approaching. Preparations for his graduation ceremony were in full swing, and our home was buzzing with anticipation. Invitations were sent, Suits were pressed, and the proud gleam in my father's eyes was undeniable. In the midst of this whirlwind of emotions, my online career was taking flight. My followers numbered in the hundreds of thousands, and brands sought collaborations, making me a notable name in the digital sphere. The world I had built online became my sanctuary, a place where I was celebrated, understood, and most importantly, seen. A week before Luke's graduation, I clinched a massive deal with an international brand. Eager to share my joy and hoping for a hint of acknowledgement, I approached my father, who was busy going over graduation arrangements.
Dad,
I began hesitantly.
I've got some amazing news. I've been chosen as the brand ambassador for Digital Dreams. It's a huge opportunity, and they're even flying me out for a launch event.
Dad glanced up, his expression unreadable.
That's good, Ella. But remember, next week is Luke's graduation. You better not be late.
Feeling deflated, but holding on to hope, I replied, I've scheduled everything so that I can be there for Luke. I wouldn't miss it for the world. The day of Luke's graduation was a blur. My morning was filled with meetings, photo shoots, and press interactions. As the hours ticked by, I felt the weight of my commitments bearing down on me. Despite my best efforts, I was running late. By the time I reached the graduation venue, the ceremony had ended. As I entered, I saw Luke in his crisp uniform, surrounded by friends and family, all showering him with praise. But the face I was most drawn to was my father's, his eyes cold, his disappointment palpable. "Ella!" he exclaimed, his voice dripping with disdain. Before I could explain, he continued, "Your online shenanigans have gone to your head. While Luke is out there upholding the family's honor, you're playing games on the internet." Stunned and hurt, I tried to defend myself. "Dad, I tried my best to be here on time. My work, the one you often dismiss, is important too. Why can't you see that?" Luke, ever the peacemaker, stepped in. "Dad, let's not do this now. Ella, it's okay." But the damage was done. The rift between my father and me had reached its breaking point. The words he spoke that day echoed in my ears, amplifying the feeling of alienation I had felt for so long. In the midst of the celebrations, I slipped away, seeking refuge in my online world, the one place where I felt valued. But little did I know that fate had one more twist in store, a turn that would redefine my relationship with my father and force us both to confront our prejudices and pain. In the aftermath of the graduation debacle, I found solace in the four walls of my new villa, a luxurious escape nestled in the city's posh neighborhood. It was a testament to my hard work and success. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I breathed freely without the weight of familial expectations bearing down on me. The villa was everything I had dreamed of: high ceilings, expansive rooms, and an art studio reminiscent of the one Mom once had. The memories of her gentle touch, her soothing voice, and her infectious laughter felt alive in that space. I threw myself into designing and furnishing the place, making it a reflection of my journey. One evening, as I sipped tea on the balcony, overlooking the city lights, my friend Zoe came over. She had been my pillar of support through the ups and downs, always lending an understanding ear. She gazed around, clearly impressed.
"Ella, this place is breathtaking. It's like something out of a magazine."
I smiled, taking in the compliment. "Thanks, Zoe." "You've earned it," she replied. "But speaking of new beginnings, have you spoken to your family?" The mention of family brought a pang of mixed emotions. "Not really," I admitted. "After the graduation incident, I needed space, and honestly, I'm not sure if I'm ready to face Dad yet." Zoe sighed. "I get it, but maybe it's time to let him see what you've accomplished, not to prove a point, but to build a bridge." Her words resonated with me, and in a moment of impulse, I decided to send Dad a few pictures of the villa, an olive branch, a glimpse into my world. To my surprise, he called the very next day. His voice, usually so stern and unyielding, sounded different. "Ella, I saw the photos. It's beautiful." I hesitated, then replied, "Thanks, Dad. I've worked hard for it." There was a pause, and then he added, "I never realized how far you've come. Maybe we could meet. I'd like to see your place in person." The sincerity in his voice was evident, but so was the undertone of longing, perhaps even a touch of envy. I took a deep breath. "I'd like that, Dad. Let's plan something soon." But as the call ended, I was left with a whirlwind of thoughts. Was it genuine admiration, or was it, as I feared, a newfound respect influenced by my material success? Only time would tell. As days turned into weeks, the anticipation of the impending reunion weighed on my mind. Yet, beneath the layers of doubt and apprehension, there was a glimmer of hope. Hope for understanding, for healing, and for a new chapter in our intertwined lives. The days leading up to my father's visit to the villa were filled with a mix of excitement and anxiety. I meticulously planned every detail, hoping that the ambience might bridge the ever-growing gap between us. Fresh flowers adorned the living room, and pictures of our family, happier times, were strategically placed, serving as a gentle reminder of our bond. The moment arrived. As the doorbell rang, my heart raced. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. There stood my father, looking slightly out of place amidst the modern opulence of my villa. His eyes darted around, visibly impressed. "Quite the place you have here, Ella," he remarked, his tone carrying a hint of surprise. "I led him to the living room." "Thanks, Dad. It's the result of years of hard work. Would you like some tea?" Over tea, we exchanged pleasantries, cautiously navigating the waters of our strained relationship. But, as the conversation deepened, it became evident that his perception of me hadn't truly changed. Every compliment was laced with an underlying expectation or comparison to Luke. "This is a beautiful place," he began, looking around. "But don't you think it's a bit too much for one person? When Luke starts a family, he'll need space. Perhaps you could." I interrupted, unable to contain my frustration. "This is my home, Dad. A place I've earned. Why is everything always about Luke?" He sighed. "I just thought, with all this space, and given how well Luke is doing..." The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. My father's visit wasn't about reconnecting or understanding my world. It was about leveraging my success for Luke's benefit. The glimmer of hope I held onto was swiftly extinguished. "Dad," I said, my voice firm, "I love you, and I love Luke, but I won't be used. I've built this life for myself, and I deserve respect, not as a backup plan for someone else." Dad looked taken aback. "I didn't mean it that way." But deep down, we both knew he did. The rest of the visit was a blur. Polite conversations, forced smiles, and a palpable tension hanging in the air. As he left, I felt an overwhelming sense of finality. That evening, reflecting on everything, I realized that some relationships, no matter how deeply rooted, can become toxic anchors. Love shouldn't be conditional or based on materialistic gains. With a heavy heart, I decided to distance myself, to cut the ties that bound us. When my phone buzzed with a message from Dad the next day, a half-hearted apology filled with justifications, I took a deep breath and pressed blocks. It wasn't out of spite, but a need for self-preservation. In the solitude of my villa, I felt an odd sense of peace.